Hey everyone, I want to give an update on the CWD and the Minnesota DNR and their botched attempt to fix and solve and control CWD. But remember my position. I'm a deer farmer up here in Lake Brunson, Minnesota. I was attacked by lying Lou Cornicelli on KFAN with Billy Hildebrand, basically stating that deer farms were the cause of the problem. And he attacked us and blamed us falsely. And now we're going to watch what they do. So Minnesota DNR went in and asked for $4.57 million, and I think it was over $1 million annually to fight CWD. They're taking our tax money, and they're kind of giving us a promise: we got this if you pay us enough money. Well, I've been on the road with my live buck display this fall. I've talked to a ton of sportsmen. I've got my ear on the news, listening to everything that goes on. And you're not going to believe what I just found out. So Minnesota Public Radio just did a nice news story on what are we doing with CWD carcasses around Crow Wing County. And the plan is that the DNR is going to, they've purchased dumpsters. They've taken our tax money and they're going to control CWD and get rid of possible infected carcasses, and they're going to bring them to the landfill. Well, if you remember back last spring in March, I did a data request, and I wanted to know what is the proper procedure for getting rid of a CWD carcass that was found in Crow Wing County. The DNR went and got the deer, took the brainstem for testing, and threw the carcass in a dumpster to head to the landfill. There are Minnesota statutes that say, not a good idea. So I did a data request and I get a response back from the DNR, and the DNR says, oh, this is an accepted normal practice to bring a known infectious carcass to the landfill. That's fine. Where birds and animals could scavenge on it, it's good. That's what I got back from the DNR. And we know from epidemiology reports, and it's common knowledge, that prions can survive the intestinal tract of a carnivore. So that would be the absolute wrong thing to do, is to leave an infected carcass on the landscape and let the animals eat it. And then when it comes out in their poop, they're spreading CWD around the landscape. Not a good thing. But the DNR told me in the data request, hey, this is an accepted normal practice. We can bring the carcasses to the landfill. So let's fast forward now from March. What happened? They've went and purchased dumpsters. They've got a big plan. We're a week before deer season, and the Minnesota DNR, according to NPR and their findings, has no clue what they're doing. They have learned from some landfills that, no, we're not taking your carcasses. Not going to do it. Don't bring them here. And we'll put a link to the NPR article that they put out, and you can read it. Okay? So they can't bring them to the landfill. So then they come up with a solution. Well, let's get a big incinerator and put that out at a landfill. We're not just going to bury them because that's not kosher, contrary to what we told Steve in his data request last March. We can't bring them to the landfill. I guess Steve was right. Steve was right. You can't bring them to the landfill. So let's incinerate them. We got to get them above 1,000 degrees. So in the NPR story, they've got a huge incinerator, and they're expecting to start burning their first possible infected carcasses of CWD. And here's what it says. When they did get it running, the bone delivery truck slated to bring 12 cubic yards of possibly infected deer spines and heads from a processing facility in Emily, Minnesota, was nowhere to be found. So they got the fire going, the truck doesn't show up. Then they made some calls and paced around as the big fire burned. It takes 8 cords of firewood purchased with our tax money to start up this incinerator every time they want to burn something. When the truck shows up 4 hours late, it doesn't have 12 cubic yards of infected, possibly infected deer meat and spines. What it has is just 2 small deer rib cages to feed into the giant fire. So somewhere between, hey, we've got a problem, we got a lot of meat to get rid of, we got some problems here, we're going to have an 8 cubic yard fire in an incinerator now that we kind of figured out we got to burn everything a week before deer season. Somewhere between, let's line this up and do a big burn and get the fire going, we lost 12 cubic yards of scraps It's lost. We don't know where it went. We know it existed. And now we got the fire going. Chuck those 2 little rib cages into the fire. We're done. This is our tax dollars at work, you people. It's unbelievable, okay? But if you continue to read on the NPR site, it's giving direction for people around Crow Wing County. Here's the direction that we're getting from our people like misleading, lying Lou Cornicelli and people in the DNR. This is what they're telling us to do. Hunters aren't allowed to take a full deer out of the infected zone until it tests negative for chronic wasting. So if you shoot a deer in the infected zone, your direction and wisdom from the state is get it tested. Perfect, okay? So you take the brainstem and send, but if you live outside that area, you can't take the deer out of the area. So hunters who live outside the area must quarter their deer and either leave the carcasses where the animal was shot. What does that mean? Leave the carcass where the animal was shot. In the woods, on the forest floor, leave it there. Send in your brainstem and take your meat out, but leave the carcass behind. Or bring them to a deer dumpster. And then these dumpsters are going to make it to the landfill and be incinerated. Okay. They can also bring the deer to processing facilities inside the infected zone. Carcasses processed at those facilities are also shipped to the incinerator. Okay, so now let's fast forward this. You shoot a deer in the zone, you don't live from the area, you debone it in the woods. You leave the carcass. Then you get your head tested. Take your meat home. And when you take your meat home, you're waiting for test results because it's going to take a while. They send you a letter back that says, hey, your deer had CWD, your brainstem results are in. You're like, oh, what do I do with my meat? And your carcass was left out in the woods for animals to scavenge on. You can't go reclaim them. You can't get the bones back that you left there 3 weeks ago because the animals have eaten them and carried them off, and there's now prions spread all over the area. This is the advice and plan of the Minnesota DNR. This is our $4.57 million at work. This is the best they can come up with. This is unbelievable, you guys. This video is going to get a little long. Keep listening. You're not going to believe it, what else I've found out. There was a guy on the Minnesota Hunting Club Facebook page. He's a fantastic guy, I'm sure. He posted a picture of a beautiful mule deer buck that he shot out west. And he sent the brainstem in. He did everything right. He loves nature. He loves resources, loves hunting. Good guy. And he sends the brainstem in, takes his beautiful mule deer back. He posts, I think it was September 18th on the club. And he says, hey, everybody, I got my test results back, and I had CWD in my mule deer. He lives in Minnesota. And I got bummer, I got to throw the meat away. That was his post. So I waited about a week and I messaged him because I knew for a fact our $4.57 million given to the DNR is just falling, and it's not going to do anything. So I call him up and I said, oh, so how did you find out? I emailed him, messaged him. How did you find out that your deer had CWD? Well, there's a website out west that I can go on and I can check my results from my brainstem. Okay, perfect. What are you going to do with your meat that's infected with CWD? You know what his response was? I'm not sure. I don't really know. Okay, it's been a couple of weeks since you found out. What's going to happen? Well, I've been looking online, and there's some people saying that you can bring it to the landfill. Well, this guy doesn't know. He's not a professional. He's just a hunter. He doesn't know. He's looking for guidance and direction from who? The state of Minnesota. So he doesn't know what to do with it. I told him he can't bring it to the landfill. This infected meat has to go to the alkaline digester at the University of Minnesota, or now it sounds like a huge incinerator at a local landfill where they're set up to take these carcasses. So he doesn't know what to do. He contacts the Minnesota DNR, and the Minnesota DNR is kind of confused. They didn't contact him. They didn't know what to do, and they finally agreed to send out a game warden to pick up his infected meat. And the game warden came and got it, and we hope disposed of it properly. Well, that's interesting, because if you and I, the people listening to this video, if we got $4.5 million to fight CWD, do you think we could have came up with the idea that, hey, there's hundreds of carcasses being imported from out west every year into Minnesota, and they're testing some of them for CWD. Maybe we should have a system where the state of, let's say, Colorado or wherever could notify us if one of our residents bring a carcass back with CWD, bring the meat back. And then we could rush right out there with a game warden, pick up the meat and dispose of it properly because we're on top of it. But lying loose spent so much time on KFAN blaming deer farms. Well, they need to double fence and they're the smoking gun. Dead giveaway. Lying Lou, I got an idea for you. Contact these other states and have them CC you in an email and tell you that, hey, John Doe from Bemidji just brought a CWD infected carcass back into Minnesota. You might want to go get the meat. That wouldn't cost anything. It's a known carcass. And most of the time, what happens to these carcasses that are brought into Minnesota? Most of the time, Minnesota's not asking, they're not looking, they're not communicating with the other states, they don't care. So what are they going to do? The people might just go dump it on the landscape where carnivores can eat it and spread CWD. Good people that just don't know any better. Our state agency, the Minnesota DNR, is totally incompetent. Totally. And some people need to be fired. There's no doubt about it in my mind. So on my farm, I've tested for CWD for 15 years. I have a closed herd status. I don't bring other deer onto my farm. The only way I could ever develop CWD is if an eagle dropped it into my pen or it came in from a wild deer on the outside. Closed herd, I don't import other deer, period. I can't get CWD. I've tested 150 deer possibly. I have a clean herd. And lying Lou Cornicelli, his best argument is we need to really crack down on deer farms and beat them up and try to get more money out of the state to fight CWD. Meanwhile, ignoring carcasses coming in. I spoke to another guy who went on an elk hunt of a lifetime. I'm going to play a video clip. He's from Minnesota. He went out to zone 7 and 8 in Colorado. He gave me a video. He went on a hunt of a lifetime. They shot 3 elk out of 5 tags. They shoot the elk, they take the meat back, and they never did get tested for CWD in a known, heavily infected area of CWD. So he comes back into Minnesota this fall, and I'm talking to him at an event. And he says, yeah, we got the deer back. I said, oh, did you butcher it up? Good meat? Yep. We just butchered it the other night. I said, oh, perfect. What was the protocol? Well, we had to leave the brain stem out there, and we had to leave, the carcasses, some of it in the field, but we were able to take back the hind quarters and the front quarters and the back straps, and we brought it back. We just butchered it the other night. I said, what do you do with all the scraps? He said, well, we're just going to feed it to our dogs. I said, oh, was your elk tested for CWD? No, nothing was tested, but the game warden visited us out there daily, making sure we did things right. We had to pull the brainstem and leave all that out there. I said, did you just leave it out there on the landscape? Yep, that's the accepted practice. We leave all the scraps behind and they get scavenged on. That's the practice. So when you come home and you butcher the deer and you eat the meat that wasn't tested from an infected area, you get to feed all those scraps to your dog, who then goes and poops in the woods. Yep. Great guy, listen to what he has to say.
That I've hunted with a long time,
Right. Okay, so real quick again, you visited with the wardens out there almost daily. They were checking on everything.
Yep.
And you had 3 nice bull elk. How were you told and instructed to transport your meat?
Basically just the meat, and if you tick the skull, the brains have to be out of it.
Right. So did you pull the back straps out of the carcass?
Yes.
Did you debone any of the meat off of the bones?
Yep. Yeah, well, mostly just the hamburger meat around the,
Yep. Yep.
But otherwise it was in hind quarters and front quarters and back straps, fillet, neck roast.
Yep. Did you take the ribs home with you?
No, we cut the meat out of the ribs.
Okay.
Out there in the field.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the carcasses that you had in Colorado, the ribs and some of the bones that you left back, they were just left in Colorado, and that was standard practice?
That's standard practice, yeah.
And when you come home now, you've got some bones with you.
Yep.
And you've got some scraps.
Yep.
And your buddies are, hey, I want the scraps. I'm going to feed them to my dog.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And you love Minnesota and hunting in Minnesota.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you're concerned about Minnesota.
Yeah, I wasn't even concerned about it till
We started talking.
about, well, what are you gonna do with the scraps? What are you gonna do with the bones?
Right.
And it's like, ooh, never really thought about it.
What do I do with them?
Exactly.
Right. So does CWD scare you to eat the meat if it possibly had it?
Yeah, I guess I haven't done the research, but yeah, if it did, I mean, I'd be concerned what it would do to
Right.
my family,
Right.
and
But they've been eating it out there forever and nobody's ever gotten sick, but you would like to know if it had CWD or not.
yeah, so I don't spread it around here.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And nobody out there was asking for it to be tested in a CWD known area.
No.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Where's the direction from our state of Minnesota? We have a known deer coming in, a mule deer coming in from the west, a known mule deer infected. The state's not talking to the other states. Minnesota DNR could care less. We're not going to talk to them and get an email letting us know. You guys, if I could do a data request and I asked how many hunters went out west in Minnesota this fall, shot an animal that tested positive for CWD, how many animals were then brought back into Minnesota only to find out my animal had CWD? Would it be 100, you guys? And if it was 100, how many of those deer did the Minnesota DNR go pick up? One, because I contacted the guy on the Minnesota Facebook page and said, hey, you can't just dump it on the landscape. He didn't know what to do. He called the Minnesota DNR. He called them. They were confused. They finally sent an officer out to get it at my prompting. You guys, the Minnesota DNR is totally incompetent. They're using our tax money. That's why I'm doing a video like this. I'm doing the video because if we don't shine light on a problem and we don't expose it, we don't get accountability. I love our natural resources. Our sportsmen in this country are fantastic. And our agency that's in charge of taking care and controlling our natural resources are doing a terrible job. And the only way they can strike out is to attack my deer farm and say Steve needs to double fence. And they get state reps like Jamie Becker Finn to attack me. I got an idea. Focus on your wild herd. Focus on deer coming in from out west. Focus on your carcasses. Figure out how to get your incinerator up and running. And when you expect 12 cubic yards of deer debris to come in and get burnt in a fire, and there's only 2 rib cages that get thrown in, I got an idea. Go find the other 12 cubic yards of deer debris. Figure out what happened to it. We're paying you to be professional, Minnesota DNR. Now be professional. Let's have a voice, you guys. Let's expose what's going on. Thank you.